right.
Hey, everybody. Welcome. Hey, everyone. Welcome. If you can hear us, we're happy you're here. We're waiting on a few of our additional guests to join us, and we're going to get started here in a second. I'd ask everybody to mute their microphones just in case, and there will be plenty of time for Q&A at the end. We'll get started here in just a moment. Well, folks, in the interest of time, I'm going to get us started here. It's a little after 3 o'clock already, and hopefully we're expecting some more folks, and hopefully they'll join us. But I'll get my part out of the way. Nobody came to listen to me anyway, so this will be a nice way to segue. Good afternoon, folks. Thanks for joining us today. This is our final Lunch and Learn session in preparation for our Leadership Breakfast celebration, and this focus today is on immigration. My name is Pat Muth, for those of you I have not met, and I'm the Director of Major and Leadership Gifts here at Catholic Charities. To start off, I would love to introduce our Executive Director, Bill McCarthy, who is going to open with a prayer. Bill?
Thank you, Pat. The title of the prayer I selected for today is Love Your Neighbor. O Lord, in a world torn apart by fear and suspicion, teach us that love is the only means to conquer fear. The love we encounter as we search you out. The love we encounter as we accept your embrace. O Lord, in a world full of anger and frustration, teach us to turn over the tables and tear down the fences which turn away the hungry and homeless. To feel and house the disciple that knocks on our door in the guise of the stranger. And to find the love we seek in loving others. O Lord, teach us to be caring of one another, to protect one another, and to help us know peace that steals gently and through quiet acts of kindness. Amen.
Amen. Thanks very much, Bill. Again, welcome everyone, particularly to our guests, our donors, our supporters. We're very grateful to have everyone here today for, again, what is our last presentation before our Lunch and Learn main event here next week. It's my pleasure today to introduce our guest speaker, Mr. Mikhael Borgonos. Mikhael is a managing attorney at Catholic Charities of Baltimore at our ESPERANZA Center and works in immigration legal services. He primarily practices immigration law and represents individuals in both affirmative and defensive immigration applications. He's got a very impressive resume, as you'll see in a second, and his past experience includes serving at 2 divisions in the U.S. Department of Justice in D.C. He is a graduate of Quinnipiac University School of Law in 2013, and he has recently been honored as the co-author of the book Blessed Are the Refugees, which contains a foreword by then Vice President and now President-elect Joe Biden. Last, as a native of the Philippines and an immigrant himself, now a naturalized U.S. citizen, he is incredibly proud to call America home. So with that, I would like to welcome our special guest, Mikhael Borgonos. Mikhael, thanks for being here today.
Thanks, Pat, and thanks for the introduction and for the prayer there, Bill. As you can see from the picture, my hair back then was vertical. It is now more on the horizontal nature. I think this is the effect of COVID-19, not having had a haircut since March. But my wife approves so far, so happy wife, happy life. Thank you for joining us this afternoon, and it is an honor to be with you. In this season of Advent, it always reminds me of my experience, my personal experience, which I'd like to share with you approximately 26 years ago. And I'm going to read it verbatim because I seek to read this myself around this time to remind ourselves how far this country and myself have come. So 26 years ago, a 9-year-old immigrant was in a plane bound for the wintry United States. His English was so-so, and he felt a new sensation on his lips. They were chapped. But unlike the majority of immigrant children coming to the US today, this child was very lucky. His entire family lawfully immigrated to the United States. He even had family to greet him at the airport in JFK. Eventually, after a few English language classes, graduating from school and now as a licensed attorney at law, that child, shaped by the grace and embrace of these United States, is now helping the most vulnerable people in his adopted nation. And that child is me, and I'm proud to be here for 26 years and many more, just like many of our immigrants and our neighbors today. And these stories are still being made today. And what you'll see from this presentation is I will go through more of a bell curve. I will share the history of immigration here in Baltimore and in the larger United States. I will present to you how the Immigration Legal Services, which is a program of ESPERANZA Center, within part of the Catholic Charities of Baltimore, plays a role in the context of immigration and welcoming foreigners and our neighbors into our neighborhoods. And I will also introduce to you what our thinking is beyond the curve. It has been quite a journey in the past 4 years, practicing law under this current administration, but we always look towards what the next few years would look like because we see law as a viable living thing. And I welcome you again this afternoon, and I guess we are ready to proceed with a slide. We are proud to say that Baltimore, and not many people know this, ranked actually as third on the Eastern Seaboard, third in the largest recipients of immigrants. First, as you may know, would be Ellis Island in New York. Second would be Boston Harbor. And third, followed right after that, is Baltimore. We had the largest great immigration wave spanning from 1830 to 1914, with approximately 1.5 million people arriving here. And there was actually a contract between a steamship in Germany and a company here in Baltimore to allow for that passage, that immigrant passage of ships between those two countries and between those two ports, carrying with them goods and immigrants from abroad and into the port city here in Baltimore, specifically the immigration pier in Locust Point. The picture that you see there, that building still actually exists. And ESPERANZA Center hosts events there because it is reminiscent of the sentimental history of the city, and that, in common with the services they provide with the services that ESPERANZA Center provides presently, which I'll discuss more in the future slides. Next slide. And as you'll see here, this is an actual picture of immigrants arriving into Baltimore and taking directly the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad to move them out west. They settled in Minnesota, Illinois, the Dakotas, and that is basically part of the what's still happening today. It's called chain migration. Once they see opportunity from elsewhere, or once they see family who have settled elsewhere, they follow them. Many of our immigrants that we serve here in the Maryland and Washington, D.C. and Virginia region originally come from the southern border, from the southern states, and they happen to have family members here in Baltimore. And because of that connection, they traverse from the border to here in Maryland. And we are here to receive them and provide them services that they may not be able to find elsewhere in Texas, Arizona, or New Mexico. The majority of the immigrants were originally from Germany. It shifted more towards Central and Eastern Europe. And currently the majority of immigrants that we're serving here in the ESPERANZA Center is coming from Central America and South America. Next slide. However, during this moment of immigration in the United States, there had always been different types of restrictions and different types of politics that shape immigration law. And we could kind of see that connection today. Even 100 years ago, many immigrants were coming into the United States. The current presidential administration at that time was not really that favorable to immigrants, in which the president, Howard Taft, instructed the immigration officer at that time to actually institute what's called a $25 ban. And that type of restrictive nature basically said that if an immigrant coming to the United States did not have $25 in their pocket, they will not be allowed entry into the United States. And they also need to show that they had a final boarding destination in the interior of the United States before they're actually allowed to step into Baltimore, New York, or Boston. That $25 prevented a lot. 668 persons were sent back to their original ports of departure, mostly in Europe. And if that were instituted today, the value of that currency is actually $715.35 in 2020 currency. Many of our clients at Esperanza do not have that money in their pocket upon arrival. Through our services, low cost or pro bono services, and I see that one of our pro bono attorneys is actually present with us today. We are able to really serve this population who need the most help. And a little bit more detail about the services within Esperanza, which sentimentally mirror the services that the Immigrant House as a historic reference provided in Locust Point is client services, educational services, health services, immigration and legal services, and family reunification. And these 5 services form a holistic triage nature per se to an income. Was there a question, perhaps? These 5 services in total help our new neighbors, our new Americans, eventually absorb U.S. society, receive the medical services they need, the health services and educational services that Esperanza Center provides. Once we're able to basically stabilize their life here in the United States, they are able to better assimilate into the country and be, normal citizens. We have been serving the community since 1963, and we have continually expanded on a yearly basis to the point that we are looking outwards into our potential international reach, including our state, local, and national partners. That is the program as a whole. And specifically, I'll go more into the ILS report fiscal year 2020 in the next slide. So we, specifically at Immigration and Legal Services, we are a staff of 12, the majority of which are attorneys. We have 2 paralegals. We also have a social worker, and we also have a pro bono coordinator. And we serve approximately 1,700 active cases as of fiscal year 2020. And that caseload has only grown to the point that we are unable to handle every single case or client that comes to our doors. We seek the assistance of our pro bono attorneys, whether they're new law graduates, retired attorneys, or attorneys who could spare us their time and treasure to basically help represent these cases that are pending in the federal government. And for those who are familiar with the criminal aspect of the practice of law, the Constitution allows for government-funded representation of individuals facing criminal charges. It's not the same in the immigration sense because immigration is civil. Because of that, there is no right to a government-funded attorney in immigration court. However, you are welcome to have representation by an attorney at that proceeding. The need is is greater than the supply that we're able to provide at this time. Fortunately, through our hard work, We continue to have quite a high number of production, 412 immigration legal consultations provided over the course of fiscal year 2020. We were able to achieve 142 requests for a work permit so that individuals who are here in the United States can work lawfully while their asylum case is, for example, pending in immigration court. And 29 individuals were able to receive green cards, technically called lawful permanent residency, through our program. Through their receipt of the green card, they are now on the pathway to becoming a US citizen, so long as they have this green card for a minimum of 5 years. This is our FY 2020 report, and we're very proud to share these numbers with you because they speak to the mission and our dedication to the work that we do. In terms of the total clients who we serve, as I've described earlier, historically, as I've said, the wave of immigrants before were from Germany and Central and Eastern Europe. The current wave that we're seeing in Esperanza Center, and frankly nationwide, are coming from Central American countries and South America, and that's because of the type of difficulties that those nations are facing at the moment, in addition to US policies that we impose in them. Just an aside, like NAFTA does have an effect on some of their economic situation and some of our aid that we provide to those countries. The majority of our top sending countries are Honduras, Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, and approximately 18% comprises of all other countries in the world. Because of this, every single one of our attorneys and staff in Immigration Legal Services speak at least 2 languages, English and Spanish. Many of our other attorneys speak 2 other languages, and that really helps us to be a very diverse group and makes us very pliable in terms of the amount of and the type of clients who we are able to serve. With that, I'm going to shift now in terms of the highlights with Pat, which Pat has mentioned previously. We were quite blessed through our pro bono program, such as pro bono attorney Scott Rose, to be able to publish this book in 2018. It is available on Amazon.com, and the stories within it are true. We've redacted some of the names so that's more confidential and private, but the stories that you read in it are about our clients who we have served and we continue to serve here at Immigration Legal Services. On the left side that you'll see there is kind of like a preview of our current COVID-19 practice. Despite the fact of the global pandemic that's affecting our clients here regionally in the city and globally, because we do have clients outside the United States, we continue to practice as safely as possible our representation of our clients. Here on the left is a picture of a recent win that we had in immigration. To the very right of our picture is actually one of our law clerks from the University of Maryland School of Law. And I wanted to put this picture side by side to show the breadth of our practice, because we embrace pro bono attorneys and volunteers, beginning when they are just students at law school, all the way to when they retire from the practice of immigration law. And because of that togetherness, we're able to achieve something that at this time the law does not grant that representation through a government-funded program. So it's something that we're certainly very proud of. We're going to shift a little bit into more details about what you may see about immigration and what you may have read about in newspapers or seen in social media, through tweets, through Instagram, through Facebook, or conversations through Zoom that you may have had with family members. What's critical here that in terms of our discussion is that there are very minute fine print details about the public charge rule and COVID-19 and its nexus with immigration law. What I'll discuss with you is, one, it's not legal advice. I have to caution on that, and it is just an overview to allow you to have a vision and taste of what these terminologies mean in the context of immigration law. So first, the public charge rule. And the public charge rule does have quite seismic effects. What you may have seen, in the earlier slide is the $25 ban. The $25 ban is in itself evidence of the public charge, that we only want certain individuals who have wealth to enter the United States. Once again, $725 in today's currency is something that our clients do not have upon entry into the United States. So this is the most recent article that I saw. It was published by the New York Times. It's on November 23rd, 2020. And the title says, "Undocumented and Pregnant, Afraid to See a Doctor." And this really resonated for me because it shaped me it reminded me of the importance of Esperanza Center. Because through the nexus of immigration, educational, and health, and the health clinic, we are here to provide the type of assistance that many individuals, such as in this article, are unable to find in other states. In this specific article, just as a summation, this mother recently came into the United States and was seeking certain medical assistance, but decided not to do so for fear that she would be reported to immigration, and through that reporting could be deported from the United States along with her child, even though her entry into the United States is to seek protection from the individuals who were persecuting her in her home country. That story, regrettably, is all too common in the present time, and is all too common that we see here in Esperanza. But we do not lose sight in our mission. We do not lose sight in the mercy for people and for others who are most vulnerable. It is a great reminder that these stories continue to exist and will continue to exist in the indefinite future. So the public charge rule has this sentiment. It has a chilling effect of preventing people from seeking medical assistance for fear that they will be reported to immigration and deported as a result. In detail, at the next slide, are the types of programs that are affected. And the government delineates 9 specific types of programs: SSI, TANF, federal, state, or local tribal income assistance, Medicaid, institutionalization for long-term care, SNAP benefits, public housing, Section 8, rental assistance. These are the exact type of assistance that our client needs, in which the government has specifically said that if you are receiving these types of benefits, you may be subject to the public charge rule, which could lead to deportation from the United States. In addition to these types of delineated charges are what's called a totality of circumstances test. Your age, your health, your education and skills, whether you can speak English, and if you do speak English, how well do you speak English, could have an effect on whether you are welcome and embraced into the United States, or if you are already here in the United States, if the US government determines whether you can stay here on a more permanent basis. This is definitely a very strict adherence to the rule. The rule is statutory, but each administration interprets it differently depending on where they stand in the political spectrum. And the next slide. In that same article that I had shared earlier, November 23rd, 2020 from the New York Times, what really strikes me is this, this language that stands in the Statue of Liberty, titled the Colossus. And it's kind of turned upside down here under the current public charge perspective. The quote from the USCIS officer here says, "Give me your tired and you poor who can stand on their own 2 feet and who will not become a public charge." This currently, right now, is the current sentiment of the immigration agency system, that it parses out who can be embraced here in the United States in times of COVID, and on top of that, whether you have the money and the English speaking ability to actually stay in the country. It is certainly a chilling effect. It has a seismic impact on our practice because clients are afraid to seek help when seeking help is critical to their physical survival in this country, irregardless of where their legal standing is. Next slide. And in more detail, another story in that article says about a mother who did not have lawful immigration status in the United States. She was pregnant and she was rushed to the hospital with a diagnosis of preeclampsia. A nurse explained to her that she needed to be in the hospital for X amount of time. The mother could not afford to be there. And all this time, she was still worried about, being able to sleep at night because of immigration. It is such an unfortunate thing that this population needs to bear on their shoulders. But with proper legal advice, the type of legal advice that we dispense at Esperanza Center, Immigration and Legal Services, we're able to tell them that this type of services that you're receiving is not considered a public charge. Therefore, you should certainly receive the service because it will not have a detrimental effect on your immigration status. However, not many people know that, but by the time they come to us, we dispense them the legal advice, they receive the services from the health clinic, and they're certainly in a much better posture personally and legally after they come through our doors. And the following slide. And just as an example here about the public charge, because a lot of people see that the public charge is more domestic. It really has an international effect because the United States has embassies across the world. Nearly every country has a US embassy. I should say that every country that we have relations with, international relations with. In this case, this is an example of a case that we had at ILS in 2019, right before the public charge rule was taken onto effect on February 2020. This involved a family who petitioned for their family members from the United States to the Philippines. And the family, who are US citizens here in the United States, filed this petition. The petition was pending for about approximately 15 years at Immigration and Legal Services. It was eventually approved. However, by the time the family went for their interview at the US Embassy in the Philippines, the consular officer there denied the family entry into the United States because of the public charge, saying that the family could be a public charge, quote, at any time. We found that decision to be arbitrary and capricious, and certainly off the wall, because it had no bearing in law in terms of our interpretation of the law. And certainly we had all the evidence to show to the US government that the family had enough wealth, had enough education, and was healthy enough to actually enter the United States. The US government denied the family's application, and to this day, the family remains separated 5,000 miles away after having received an application 15 years ago for a visa. That story continues to be seen in many of our facets at ILS, and it really creates more of a permanent separation on a worldwide scale. Next slide. Once again, this is to show our continuous practice in light of COVID-19. We maintain social distance in some ways, not so social distance on the right-hand side, but we wear masks whenever we go to court. In state court, depending on the status of that specific judge, we appear in hearings virtually or telephonically. In immigration court, we continue to go to asylum hearings and asylum trials when and where the court wants us. This is key because many cases in state courts, in immigration courts, last for about 5 to 10 years. The Baltimore Immigration Court itself, which is composed of 7 judges, have a docket of about 30,000 cases, pending cases for litigation. Because of that, hearings are scheduled currently right now, as we speak, in the year 2024, 2025. So clients wait X amount of time before they are able to see a judge to get a final decision on their application, such as an application for asylum. Next slide. In terms of COVID-19 and immigration, and I'm going to mix in public charge here as well, we advise our clients that you need to put your life as a priority over your legal status. And the reason for this is logical in some ways, because the only case where life is not involved is death and murder. These are the type of cases that we do not wish to pursue. We want to keep the patient alive so that we are able to find the legal cure and they remain healthy enough to pursue a living, productive, meaningful life here in the United States. Our advice, especially in times of COVID, is life over legal. And that actually drives with the current standing from USCIS, which is the US Citizenship and Immigration Services. They've been more forgiving with respect to COVID-19 and its intersect with the public charge. The government is saying that regardless of your immigration status, you can seek testing, screening, treatment, or preventative care, and even a vaccine if it's available and when it's available for COVID-19, and it will not, quote, negatively affect any of the public charge analysis. But that's kind of conditioned because there is some language from immigration that we're seeing that the totality of circumstances test, this term that I discussed earlier in the presentation, does come roaring back into the analysis in COVID-19, whether this person is constituted to be a public charge. This is entirely a new set of breadth of immigration practice that has been untested. It will only be tested once the patients actually come in, once cases are litigated in court meaning in immigration court, in federal court, and perhaps even in state court. So much confusion and untested waters that we are reverting back to the fundamentals of law when we advise clients. And that is, you have the right to remain silent. You have the right from unreasonable searches and seizures. You have the right to speak to an attorney. You have the right to have a hearing before an immigration judge, and certainly do not sign any documents in which you do not fully understand what those documents say. And by retreating and reverting back to those fundamental practices and advice of law, we are able to bring comfort and clarity in this very confusing times, especially in COVID-19 and the public charge environment. Next slide. And similar to the case that I presented earlier from the Philippines, this one is also from that same case in relation to COVID-19, because COVID-19 as a health matter not only has a global reach, being a global pandemic, but COVID-19 has an international reach as what I would call a legal pandemic, because every person who wishes to enter the United States, apart from a green card holder or a US citizen, is asked this question. And this question had always been in existence pre-COVID. You see this question shifted in different types and languages and massaged in different types and languages depending on the times. But the question is, do you have a communicable disease of public health significance? And this question is so broad that many individuals who are coming from the border and seeking asylum here in the United States have been prevented entry into the United States by answering this question positively, even though they do not really understand the scope and breadth of the reach of that question. Because of that, during this time between March and December, US embassies have been closed because of COVID, and we will see in the next few years that there will be a reduction of immigration into the United States and tourism in the United States as a result of the pandemic being a public health significance. In response to that, we saw the need from ESPERANZA Center to provide hope and opportunity in which, as of March, we were able to provide 50 fee waiver applications owing to an individual's COVID-19 diagnosis or a hardship related to COVID-19. In many of these fee waiver applications, I see it when they apply saying, I've lost my job, my mother has COVID-19 and is in the hospital. It really breaks my heart. Like, this is a type of suffering that the community is facing at this time. And in addition to that, they do not wish to get help from a medical provider for fear that they would be taken by immigration. It is truly a subset of our society that are living distantly within our shadows. Next slide. As I noted earlier, one of the things that we do at ILS, and we meet every Friday for these team meetings to basically brainstorm what's ahead with immigration so that we are postured and we're prepared to what could come next. And this part in the next few slides would be beyond the curve. And I credit my team for thinking about these ideas so that we could help individuals who may need help in the future, but the law is not really there yet to provide the type of legal relief. So the next type of example that you'll see here is the Selective Service Act. Many of you know that for males in the United States between 18 to 26 years old, that they must register for the Selective Service in the event of a draft leading to a declaration of war by Congress. But in detail, this specific act actually orders males, including undocumented immigrant males, to also register for the Selective Service Act. If you're here in the United States between 18 to 26 years old and you're undocumented, the law requires that you must also register. But by failing to register, and many of our clients do not know this, by failing to register and they somehow apply for citizenship in the future, that failure to register could actually prevent them from getting naturalized here in the United States. And if the US government seeks to bring them to trial in federal district court for failing to register under the Selective Service Act, they could actually be fined up to $10,000 and sent to jail for 5 years or both. It is quite a strict form of punishment for failing to register. So what we're doing now is registering individuals, our clients, for this specific type of requirements so that many years down the road, when they are on their journey to citizenship, they do not have to relive what a potential nightmare would be if they did not register. Most amazingly, if someone fails to register under the Selective Service Act, they could actually be detained by mandate by immigration, which could then lead to them going to immigration court and going to trial for their deportation case. Another interesting note that we're also looking at Immigration and Legal Services, and I credit this to our team of law clerks during the summer. Every summer we have 4 law clerks who serve with us. We take them to court, we take them to immigration hearings. And this year we had 2 individuals from the University of Maryland and 2 from the University of Baltimore. And one of the research projects is to actually look at the intersection between space law and immigration law. And this was spurred because of the SpaceX launches during the summer. What we found is that the landscape of space law is not yet developed, but immigration law is heavily developed. So there hasn't been much of an intersect, and we like that idea because it allows for changes in law. What we did agree on is that in order to be an astronaut in the United States, you need to be a US citizen. So individuals in the United States who are dreamers, who have a status of what's called deferred action for childhood arrivals, they are here in the United States lawfully, but should they become someday an astronaut, they can never technically fly in a US spaceship. Many of our DACA clients on a national look some of them have become attorneys, some of them have become professors and teachers, social workers, and even doctors who are serving in the front lines in the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. What is also critical in this intersect between space law and immigration is that because the law is not developed, there are questions about what will happen if an immigrant under a tourist visa actually takes a spaceship outside the United States and into space. Is that type of action unlawful under US immigration law? And the answer is we don't know, which is to us, for those who are such legal nerds, is such an interesting imagination that there is this unknown area in our system that is undeveloped. And it's certainly just up to Congress. It's certainly up to people developing the law to make it work so that it is fair and meaningful for the current society and future societies. So this is where space law and immigration law is coming from. And we hope that in the next few years, there will be hopefully more of a nexus between space and immigration practices. And the next slide is more of our beyond the curve. As I mentioned earlier, we have partners and stakeholders in a state, local, regional, and national level. We are now reaching on an international scale. And this only makes sense as a legal practice because immigration law is international. And many of our clients are from outside the United States who come in and receive our services. We've been interacting with other law schools in the Philippines, in Taiwan, and most recently in Saudi Arabia to exchange ideas of laws and to exchange current country conditions in which asylum could arise. Specifically in Saudi Arabia, we talked about the Hajj, in which the Saudi Arabian government, due to COVID-19, restricted the limited Hajj only on a domestic basis. In Taiwan, I could say that we had a law clerk who presented, democracy in Taiwan and democracy in Hong Kong, and that law clerk is now a professor at a law school in Taiwan. And in the Philippines, we talked a lot about the current Duterte administration and democracy movements there as well. Because altogether, when these issues come up on an international scale, they do have an effect in our cases that are coming through the border or are still pending in immigration court, the same as they are pending at immigration agencies in Maryland. So this is our international reach. This is certainly a type of practice that is new to us and new to our partners, but we're trying to make this formation so that we stay beyond the curve in terms of our practice of immigration law. And I believe the last slide would be room for questions and comments. Immigration is about embracing others, and I'm happy to embrace any questions and comments that you may have.
Mike, let me jump in and just on behalf of the group, thank you very, very much for being with us today and for sharing all of your knowledge. Whether it's COVID deaths or immigration numbers, we talk about these things in big, broad strokes and big, large numbers, but you're the type of person who deals with the individuals on a daily basis. And it's really important for us to hear, I think, as a community about those individuals and about your work with them and on behalf of them through Catholic Charities. So thank you so much for taking the time. With that, I would love to open it up to questions. If anybody has any questions, please feel free. The group's small enough where we can fire away and I'll referee as necessary.
Hey, Mike, it's Mark McClone. Thank you so much for the presentation. Incredibly informative. Thank you. You mentioned that a lot of the cases can be scheduled, 3, 4, 5 years out. Are all of your clients still able to be resident here in the Baltimore area or in the U.S. while they're waiting for their case, or is that are they forced to leave the U.S. during that time?
Hey, Mark, that's a very good question. And the answer is two facets of it. Cases that have already been pending in Baltimore Immigration Court and immigration courts worldwide, immigration courts nationwide, they're already docketed into the system. And because of that, those individuals can and are allowed to stay in the United States while they await for their hearing. And depending on the case, for example, for an asylum case, they are also eligible to apply for a work permit to allow them to not be a public charge so that they can meaningfully provide for themselves and their family. However, there's another subset of individuals who are recent arrivals through the US-Mexico border or US-Canada border, who under the current administration they are being turned away, in which they have to await their trial while they are outside the United States. And the majority of those individuals are physically waiting in the US-Mexico border while they are waiting for, for their immigration hearing by mostly at this time, an immigration judge in Texas. It is an unfortunate policy that many of our international partners have criticized, and we hope that that policy will change in the upcoming Biden-elect administration.
Thank you.
Would anybody else like to ask Mike a question? Mike, while we're waiting for anybody else to formulate things, you mentioned, the demand far outweighs the supply of resources at this point, whether it be attorneys or human resources or financial resources. Can you talk a little bit more about the scope of the need as it relates to Esperanza in particular, and maybe this region of the country, and maybe quantify that a little bit more for people, if you could?
Yes. For example, the U.S. government, through its agency, the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, recently increased the fees of some immigration forms and benefits that immigrants, if eligible, are applying. The fee to apply for naturalization in the United States is now $725. When I started practicing immigration law in 2013, it was around $500. There are fee waivers that our clients are eligible and can apply for. However, the analysis for those fee waivers have becoming very strict. In terms of the actual market value of this type of work on a private scale, an asylum case that many private immigration attorney offices are charging at this time ranges from $10,000 to $15,000, which is a lot of money, especially if you don't have $25 in your pocket or $700 in your pocket when you came in through the border. In terms of our services, we provide that pro bono if we are able to recruit a pro bono attorney or a law clerk who is currently a student in school. If we are unable to provide that case pro bono, our fee for immigration legal services on an asylum case from start to finish is $800. So it is certainly something that's more affordable in scale compared to what the market value and market price for the case is. And regrettably, many private firms take too much advantage of the need and desperation by this vulnerable group of people, in which, if work by that private attorney falls below the standard of care, the client is the least likely to file a complaint before the pertinent state bar because of fear of deportation.
Thank you. Does anybody else have a question for Mike? Well, Mike, if no one has another question, I have one that I can leave you with, and then we can part ways. But this is more of a general question, and it's something that I'd like to ask all of our folks who work in a variety of our programs from time to time. I mean, the scope and scale of the challenges our clients and our world face can be pretty daunting at times, and immigration is an area where that's been front and center of late. What gives you hope? What gets you, what gets you moving every day to do the work that you do?
Oof. If my mother would hear, she would cry. But the truth is, it's my mom. Just a little bit of family history. My mom actually grew up in a plantation in the Philippines. It was owned by an American company called Del Monte. I think they're still present there, but it's owned by a Philippine subsidiary now. But through her and seeing Americans in that plantation, that was basically like the hope and like, wow, there's a better world out there. And for her to come from this farm in the middle of nowhere, and we're now here, and I've become an attorney doing immigration law, it's like, it's only the American dream that allows it to be the way it is. So I know that many of you have come from more, different stories of immigration. And I think if you look deep far enough into your history, these stories resonate and there's similarities in them. I think it's what makes this country so beautiful.
Well, that is an incredibly hopeful and wonderful message to end on, Mike. Again, we're very grateful. Before we go, I'd like to take this opportunity again to thank all of our generous supporters and benefactors who joined us today. This type of work that we do at Catholic Charities and folks like Mike are engaged in on a daily basis isn't possible without your support. So we are incredibly grateful for that. And these are the types of programming opportunities we'd like to continue to offer you until we figure out what's next with the pandemic. We'd love to do this in person maybe next year. But we are incredibly grateful for you who have made time to join us today and for your continued support. So with that, I'd like to thank again Mike Borgonos for being with us today as our guest speaker. Be conscious of everyone's time. I will wish everyone a happy holidays. And for those of you who will be joining us at Leadership Breakfast next week, we hope to see you. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us at any time. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Many
Thank you,
blessings.
Mike.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.